what I found. This could be the best kept secret in woodworking as far as miter saws go, especially budget miter saws. This is packed full of features that I've not seen on any other miter saw in this price range, including my previous pick, the SKIL. Let me show you. Before we get started, if you'd like to check out this saw or any other tool I show in this video today, I'll link those in the description and the pinned comment to help you find them easier, as well as the View Products button right here on YouTube. Before we get started, one of the most popular things I hear from beginner woodworkers is, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I don't have the right tools, I don't have the shop yet. Well, I created something just for you, and it's this shirt. Make sawdust, not excuses. This is a battle cry for beginners or anybody who needs a little bit of kick in the pants motivation to get out there and get started. We want you to go make some sawdust because that's when you learn and that's how you build progress. You got to get out there and stop making those excuses that you're not ready. You are. Just go make sawdust. I'll link this in the description below. I'll give you 10% off of this shirt if you use the code 0excuses, all one word, at checkout. Go check us out. The very first big power tool I ever purchased was a miter saw for woodworking because I needed to be able to make accurate miter cuts or angled cuts consistently. And that's what a miter saw is good at, and that's what they excel at. And this one is no different. I put this through the paces over the last week or so to find out, is this actually worth the price? And for everything that's packed in here, even at full price, it's well worth it in my opinion. Now, Lowe's did send me this saw for review in a previous video we worked on, but I've kept it around so that I could put it through more paces and find out more about it. So in this video, we're gonna go over all the features that this has, what I like, what I don't like, and we'll compare it to the SKIL 10-inch miter saw, which is a comparable unit, but I think this one slightly edges that one out. So let's go over the features of this saw. This is a 15 amp saw, so you're getting plenty of power to cut through anything that you're gonna want to with a miter saw. Now this is a 10-inch version. There is a 12-inch version if you want that extra capacity that is identical to this saw. Costs a little bit more, but you do get that 12-inch blade and a little bit more cut capacity. But I think the 10-inch saw is one of the better picks for a shop. For one, space savings, and for two, I've rarely run into any capacity issues with my 10-inch Festool. So I think a lot of times you just kind of want biggest best, but you don't necessarily need it 99% of the time. This saw has some really nice features for this price point. First, it does have that cut line indicator, which a lot of people really like. And I like this one because it's a shadow line. You can even see the outline of the teeth, so you know exactly where the kerf of the blade's gonna cut. This is huge. My Festool, which costs many times more than this saw, has a laser line that I can barely see because I'm red-green colorblind. It can barely see that color of laser, but this shadow line I have zero issue seeing, and it outlines that full kerf. I love it. There is a button on top to turn that on and off should you not need that or want that for any reason. Speaking of the motor, when you pull the trigger on this saw, it comes to life. There is a blade brake here that does stop this blade in a decent amount of time. It's not an instant stop, but it does slow it down so it's not free spinning forever like the SKIL was. Out of the box, it's extremely well packaged. Nice big thick styrofoam all the way around it. On the top, you're going to get your dust bag and this handy dandy clamp that works surprisingly well for this style of clamp. Not the biggest fan of this style clamp, but it does work on this model, which I can't say the same for my DeWalt. It just never has worked right. And then you have the miter saw itself in the box, and that's really all you get. It's already set up, ready to go. Now this is a dual bevel sliding compound miter saw. And a lot of times you don't see dual bevel in this price range or even bevel cuts in this price range. A lot of times they're just basically chop saws and they're not sliding. So having all of these features in this price range is absolutely awesome. First and foremost, I took a piece of plywood and cut to figure out how wide of a cut I actually got. 12 inches there. And what's great about that, a lot of times you can just flip the board over and make that extra cut, and that gives you 24 inches of actual cross cut that you can do in 2 passes. So a lot of times you worry about that sliding capacity, and it's not really an issue, and since you do have that cut line indicator, you're able to line up that cut really nicely. This is a miter saw, so you're going to be able to miter 55 degrees to the left and a massive 60 degrees to the right. This is a high angle miter saw that you don't normally see in this price range. You do have positive stops along the way going each way at 0, 15, 22.5, 31.6, and 45, and then a little hard stop out at either 60 or 55. One of the most unique features here is the way you do the bevel cut. It's this big blue handle right here. When you flip that up, it unlocks it, and you're able to do your bevel cuts to the left. And there's a knob right there in the front of the bevel cuts that you just pull and twist to the right, and then it unlocks the right side bevel cuts. This is very, very nice because you can operate everything from the front of the saw. Most saws have you reach around to the back and undo some lever or knob or something to be able to do those bevel cuts. I like this setup a lot. I like it a lot. You do get 48 degrees bevel cuts in either direction, so that's really nice. These extra support wings are fantastic. A lot of times you just get metal rods that are bent and you can pull those out. They work fine. I like these. They slide out. They're the same material as the bed of the miter saw here, and they have a little wider footprint, so it's going to balance your material a little better, and they slide in and out. And everything to use those is that lever on the front, which is, again, very nice because most of the time you have to reach around to the back and do those thumb screws and things like that. Now these do have thumb screws on the back specifically for moving your fences in and out. You want to make sure that you're moving those out of the way if you're doing any bevel cutting, because you will cut the fence if you don't, which is true on most any miter saw though. And then the other thumb screw just locks in this clamp. This is a sliding miter saw and it's a nice smooth glide. It's not grindy or anything like that. It's a nice smooth glide. One thing that I noticed on this one was the entire carriage moves on this. A lot of times you'll see the way the miter saws work is just like a tube outside a tube and it kind of rides on those. This kind of is more robust because of the basically the carriage that all of this is moving on, which I think is really going to improve your deflection here. Now, even the Festool, the mighty Festool that costs $1,600 has deflection if you push too far left or right. This saw and any other sliding miter saw is no different than that. If you're putting pressure left or right, it will move. But if you're just doing in normal cutting, normal sliding cutting, you shouldn't have any issues at all here. I haven't noticed any when I've been making my cuts. Now you can lock this slide back. There's a thumb screw there that just locks it down so it doesn't move. And then of course you can see it stowed in this position here. There's a little button there you can pull out that unlocks it so you can raise it up and you're ready to cut. And then of course for storage or transport, you can move that around. And speaking of storage or transport, this thing is fairly light for a 10-inch miter saw. Very easy to move around the shop, especially if you have to take your miter saw in and out of the shop. If you don't have a specific shop, you have to take your tools in and out to be able to do your work. This might be one for you just because it's lightweight, easy to move. This does have a depth stop adjustment too, so you can do dados and grooves and things like that should you need to stop the blade at a certain distance there. It's just a little thumb screw so you can micro adjust that to get any depth that you're really wanting to dial it in. This works like many other miter saws. I'm still glad to have it on here. You do have onboard tool storage for you to change the blade. And speaking of the blade, it's a decent blade on here. We'll get more into that. It's a lower tooth count blade, so it's not really meant for fine finishing, but if you're just rough cutting 2x4s, 2x6s, that sort of thing, this should work fine. So let's talk about the performance of this saw. Because we have that 15 amp motor, we have plenty of power to cut anything we're going to want to cut. I cut pine 2x10s, I cut plywood, I cut some 2x4s, I even cut a piece of 1.5 inch thick walnut without any issues at all. More than enough power to do whatever you're going to want. As far as accuracy goes, dead accurate. You can dial this in too. There's a red indicator there that you can move if you need to, and this little plate on the bottom is bolted on. You can slide it slightly. If you need to adjust for your positive stops, it's able to do that, much like DeWalt and many others have those very similar to that, which I like to see because not all miter saws allow you to do that. The Evolution saw was locked in, if I remember right. As far as quality of your cuts, that is highly dependent on the blade itself, and this blade for rough cutting is perfectly fine. Even on this walnut, it cut a very nice clean cut on this walnut. And there's a couple of things you can do to actually improve the cuts, especially on plywood. You see here it tore it out pretty good, especially on the bottom side of the cut, which is typical with miter saws. There's zero clearance tape that I've recommended for years. It's Fast Cap zero clearance tape. I use it on my DeWalt miter saw, and you can just lay it down and make the cut, and it will stay on there because it's tape. And then you have zero clearance on the bottom of that cut, and it really does help clean up the cuts, even with these lower tooth count blades. However, I really do recommend you get a higher tooth count blade if you're going to be using this for woodworking. In other words, building furniture and cutting boards and different things like that. You want really nice clean cuts on the cross cut, which is what this miter saw is doing. But if you're just rough framing things up, this blade's perfectly fine. I'll drop a link to a couple of blades I would recommend, depending on your budget, for the saw if you want to upgrade the blade, as well as that zero clearance tape. So before we get to the SKIL comparison to see which one of these budget miter saws is the best, what do I not like about this? First, dust collection. Dust collection is not good on this, y'all. Not even, it ain't. With that said, I have yet to find a miter saw with superior dust collection. Before I bought my Festool, everybody was saying, or everything I read was like, it has an amazing dust collection. This is the greatest dust collection ever. I bought a Festool dust extractor. I bought the bigger Festool dust extractor hose and the Festool Capex. So I should be max capacity here, best dust collection ever. It's just all right. You still see a bunch of dust coming up around it, but that's just the inherent nature of miter saws. They're just dusty animals. There's nothing we can do about it. This one is quite dusty, even with dust collection, even with the dust bag. It doesn't matter which way you go, you're gonna sling some dust. And there's a couple of reasons why that is. First, there's plenty of suction coming through here to pull that dust in, or pull dust in anyway. The problem is when these type miter saws, most all miter saws, when they're at full plunge depth, which is where we're cutting at in most of the time, or at least mostly plunge depth, the angle that the dust is coming off of the blade does not hit this dust shroud here, or this dust hole. It needs a shroud around it, much like Shop Nation has like different fittings that 3D printed, or he come up with these kits that improve dust collection. I put one on my DeWalt miter saw, and it basically just helps funnel that dust up into the port. If he has one for this Kobalt, I'll link it below. But that would massively improve this, massively. It's not hitting it at the right angle. I think the dust is coming back and hitting where this bevel controls are in the back, and then it just sprays from there. Is that a deal breaker? No, because almost all miter saws like this are dusty. It's just part of it. I would just like to see it improved. Second thing is the throat plate is fairly wide here. You can adjust it a little bit, but again, I think zero clearance tape from Fast Cat would fix this right up. And one minor nitpick, the blade, but I understand how they have these set up. These are a lot of times meant for marketed to construction contractors, roughing out things. So this blade is perfectly fine for that. But for woodworking, I just think I would like to see a better blade, but we pick those up aftermarket usually anyway. There's several budget options out there. Again, I'll link some in the description so that you can upgrade your blade. Other than that, this is a fantastic saw. Fantastic. I put my seal of approval on it, but how does it compare to the SKIL? So how does this compare to the competitors? And I think one of the main competitors to this is the SKIL 10-inch saw. I previously reviewed that a few months back on the channel, and I was quite impressed. But this kind of goes above and beyond that SKIL in all ways but one. The SKIL maxed out at 50 degrees both left and right, where this one's 55 and 60 degrees. And yeah, there are tricks you can do to get more degrees out of your miter saw. I actually have a video on that. If you just search 731 miter saw degrees, you'll find it. But having that 60 degree capacity, I actually hit 55 or 60 degrees quite often, especially when you're building furniture or doing X braces and things like that. You may need that extra little bit, and I'm glad to see that's on here. Also, this has a blade brake, so it doesn't free spin as long as the SKIL. The SKIL took a little while to spin down, and if you don't know, a miter saw tip, when you make your cut, you're supposed to let that blade come to a full stop before you raise it up, and time is money. If you're sitting there waiting on it, it may not be a huge deal, but it's one of those things that it's just nice to have. And this also has more bevel capacity than the SKIL. The SKIL is 48 degrees to the right and 46 to the left. This has 48 degrees both ways. Both the SKIL and this Kobalt have the LED shadow line, so you're not missing out on anything there. I think the extendable arms here are a little better on this model versus the SKIL, and I think the way you bevel this is by far better than what you do on the SKIL. It's not a huge deal. You have to reach around behind on the SKIL and undo that knob to be able to bevel, but this is so much handier having it up front. It's just, every miter saw should have this. Everyone. So what about that big old elephant in the room, and that's the price difference between the SKIL and this Kobalt. Now the SKIL is about $249 retail price, which is an extremely good value. I absolutely love that saw for that price. This 10-inch Kobalt is about $100 more on retail, but is that a bad thing? Well, it's obviously more expensive, but what do you get for that extra $100, and should you spend that $100 on this saw? Well, I think that's kind of dependent on what you want. This does have that extra degrees of cutting, 60 degrees one way, 55 degrees the other, which the SKIL only has up to 50 degrees. Is that a big deal? Well, it just depends on what you're building, and when you run into that limitation, it can be frustrating. So having that extra capacity is very much worth it in my opinion if you cut a lot of miters. Now, there's not a whole bunch of miter saws on the market in this price range that goes up to 60 degrees, so that is a good value there. Also, the bevel cutting, 48 degrees both ways. I think the SKIL goes 48 one way and then 45 or 46 the other way. So you are getting a little bit extra capacity both ways on this bevel cut. and the way you operate this bevel cut from the front is a lot more convenient versus the SKIL. Outside of those two could be big features for some people. They're very, very similar. They both have 15 amp motors. They both have the shadow line cut. They both do bevel and miter cuts, although again, a little bit more capacity here. They're both sliding saws. The SKIL does have a better clamp than the Kobalt. I do think the Kobalt has better extension wings. Other than that, like, they're very, very similar. So it's gonna come down to, is the $100 worth it for you to get that extra capacity? For some, I think it will be. For others, I think they're gonna be satisfied with that $250 SKIL. And it's a fantastic saw. I don't think you can go wrong either way, but you let me know which one you would be. If you're a beginner just getting started and you want to make money with your woodworking, I've got a lot of free resources for you. If you go to school.com/731woodworks, that's school with a SKOOL. What you're going to get there is a first sale guide that I've put together. A nice video course is going to walk you through how to get your very first sale fast. There's also 90+ project ideas for you to choose from to get your first project going. And then we have 3 live interviews that we did with members of our Sawdust Startups community on how they're actually making money with their woodworking. All of this is free for you at school.com/731woodworks. Go check it out. Also, grab you one of these shirts. If you're in the market for a miter saw, you should check this out. I'll link to it in the description, the pinned comment, and that view products right here on YouTube. This is seriously good, and there's even a 12-inch version if you wanted that higher capacity. If you like this video and you want to see another budget option, check out the SKIL review right there. Click in that box, get you the big old virtual fist bump.